have whoever signed up for that. And it's on dust control projects and planning. The moderator is Kevin Durkee, who is the Quality Assurance Manager in the Monitoring and Analysis Division for the South Coast Air Quality Management District. He has a BS in Atmospheric Sciences from UCLA. He's been working in this area for the South Coast and this area for around 30 years. So he comes at it with a wealth of experience, and we're fortunate to have him moderate today's session.
Thanks, Kurt. I wanted to thank everybody for sticking it through. It's been a long day, but a lot of really great presentations, a lot of good information. And thanks for the environment here. It's a great place to have a meeting. Quickly introduce our speakers. First one will be Adam Solis with the Department of Water and Power, Los Angeles DWP. He brings a wealth of experience and lessons learned from dust control at Owens Lake. And I don't think we can underestimate the work that's been done there. It's been pretty impressive over the last 30 plus years. And they've had really good successes. So yeah, not everything applies here, but we can definitely learn something from that. Next will be Matt Desert, the Air Pollution Control Officer of the Imperial County Air Pollution Control District. He brings a regulatory perspective and by the county's unique dust control challenges. And looking forward, they are the air pollution control district that's going to have the worst impacts from the expanding fly ash. Jessica Hughes, Senior Environmental Manager with the Imperial Irrigation District. And this group is really at the forefront of studies of the Salton Sea and the surrounding deserts, as you saw in the last presentations. They are, at this point, really the boots on the fly, really starting to make things happen. They're implementing these dust control technologies and doing studies and projects that will lead the way towards the future mitigation programs. And then finally, Vivien, I'm gonna mess up your name, Vivien, sorry. He's the Salton Sea Program Manager at the California Department of Water Resources, overseeing this 30,000 acres of habitat and dust suppression projects that are starting to be underway. They really ramped up staffing with his guidance, and it'll be really good to see the expanding role of the state going forward as these SSMP dust control projects get underway. So collectively, these talents have a wealth of knowledge and experience. So I encourage you to take advantage of their expertise and ask some good questions after all the four of them speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Owens Lake. I am a civil engineer. I work for the City of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and today I'm going to be going over the Owens Lake Dust Mitigation Program. A lot of you might not know this, but the City of LA has been successfully mitigating dust at the Owens Lake for nearly 2 decades now. So I'm going to be talking in 2 parts. First part, I'll go over some of the background, hopefully answer a lot of the questions that you guys may have. Second part, we're talking about our accomplishments to date, to include total dust control, what that costs us, and how much water we're using on the lake. So the Owens Lake, represented by the yellow star on the map, is about 220 miles north of the city of LA. The dark blue meandering line north of the star represents the Owens River, and the light blue meandering line south of the star, represents the LA Aqueduct. So why is the city of LA mitigating dust 220 miles north? Well, it's because we built an aqueduct, started diverting that water out of the Owens River and down to the city of LA. Within a matter of 10 to 15 years, the Owens Lake dried up and became a source of dust emissions. And this is what the Owens Lake used to look like during high wind events before we started implementing dust control. So a little regulatory history, like I mentioned, back in 1913, the LA aqueduct was completed. We diverted the water to the lake right up from the source of dust emissions. Next big milestone was in 1987 when the EPA established standards for PM10 dust emissions. At the time, they also classified the lake as a serious area of non-attainment. In 1998, our air regulators, the Great Basin Unified Air Pollution Control District, adopted the state implementation plan, and it was their plan to the state on how we would be mitigating dust at the Owens Lake. The year 2000, PWP started implementing dust control. Failure to comply would have resulted in fines of up to $10,000 per day. After over a decade of dust control orders, PWP started waving their hands asking, hey, when's this ever gonna end? 2 years later, in 2013, we reached an agreement with our air regulators that set the limits to 53.4 square miles of total dust control that they can order us to control. 2018, our last major project was completed in December, and we're doing that. We implemented 48.6 square miles of dust control. So our regulator can order us to do 53 square miles. We've done 48 square miles to date. So the methods that we use to control dust, there's actually 5 different methods. We call them best available control measures, or BACMs. I'll be going through the 5 BACMs in order of most water intensive to least water intensive. So our 2 most water intensive BACM, or our first BACM is shallow flooding. We have shallow flooding ponds and shallow flooding sprinklers. Obviously, the sprinklers are a more efficient way to spread dust throughout our dust control, spread water throughout dust control areas. The ponds cost us about $26 million per square mile to construct. We're using about 48,000 acre feet of water per year to operate these ponds. Birds obviously like ponds, so we're getting high habitat value, and there's also low maintenance for the ponds. The shallow flood sprinklers cost a little bit more, $32 million per square mile. Obviously, there's more infrastructure involved. We're operating these with 5,000 acre feet of water per year. The birds tend to like the ponds more than the sprinklers, so we don't have any habitat value there. And it's also high maintenance. Obviously, there's a lot more moving parts with sprinklers. The second best available control measure is managed vegetation. The third one is brine. Our managed vegetation, and of course, I'm going in order of decreasing water demand. Managed vegetation costs us $36 million per square mile. Obviously, a little bit more than sprinklers, because we're not only installing sprinklers, we're installing subsurface drainage systems, and we're also seeding, planting, or plugging native plants to get the areas established. It takes us 7,000 acre feet of water per year to operate. The birds do like it. There's some habitat value, and maintenance is extremely high because we're maintaining the irrigation system and the plants. The brine costs us about $24 million per square mile to build, relatively zero water use. Birds don't like the brine that much, so no habitat value, but maintenance is really low. The fourth BACM is tillage. The fifth BACM is gravel. I visited some tillage sites out of Salton Sea, so I know you guys are implementing tillage there. Again, decreasing water demand. Tillage is our least expensive BACM. It costs us about $500,000 per square mile to build. There's zero water use for tillage, so we really like it, but the birds don't like it, so there's no habitat value. Maintenance is relatively low. We operate these areas and maybe maintain some of them maybe once a year. Some of them don't get maintained for a few years at a time. Gravel is our most expensive BACM, $37 million per square mile. Again, no water use, but no habitat. We like gravel since there's really low maintenance for these ones. So we don't just build BACM and walk away from it. We have to do regulatory compliance monitoring. Each BACM has different frequencies of monitoring, and we're going to go over that on the next few slides. So our managed vegetation, we do an annual assessment of the vegetation using a satellite image every December. We also do a field campaign with ground truthing to build the map that you see on the left-hand side, and that map helps us determine the performance of our managed veg. Shallow flooding, we used to do every 8 days. Now we're doing this every 5 days starting this dust season. So essentially every 5 days we get a snapshot of what the entire lake looks like, and we can assess the areas for wetness covered for shallow flood performance. Tillage probably has the most criteria for compliance. To name a few of them, we use LiDAR maps every quarter, so every 3 months we have LiDAR maps to determine the roughness of the tillage. We use TOM stations to monitor PM10 emissions 24/7, and we also have Sensit sites to monitor sand flux. Gravel is a lot more simple. We do aerial photography from a helicopter on a weekly basis, and we also do field inspections to assess for any sand inundation. Brine is assessed once a year again. This is done in the fall, usually in October. We use a satellite image like you can see in the photo on the right-hand side. We also have sensors here that are measuring sand flux, and we also do field inspections, just to name a few. So there's tons of challenges of operating on the Owens Lake. Just to name a few of those challenges, we do see a lot of climate change in both extremes. During wet seasons, we do get a lot of flooding. You can see the image on the bottom right. We also do experience high droughts. During these high droughts, we are still required to maintain all of our dust mitigation, so we don't get a break in mitigation. All the water that's being used is used regardless if there's a drought throughout the state or not. We're constantly dealing with equipment getting stuck. This is really hard on our construction schedules. Just last week, I saw 3 pieces of equipment get stuck. Corrosive soils, due to the nature of the soils, we're using materials that are really expensive, HDPE, and a lot of stainless steel piping and infrastructure. And of course, high gusts of winds up to 100 miles per hour. You can see some of the damage there on top. So another challenge is actually property ownership. When we're ordered to mitigate dust, our air regulator does not consider who owns different properties. So on the bottom left photo, you can see a picture of 4 different properties, 4 different owners on one managed vegetation site. All 4 owners have different requirements that they ask us to meet. So not only are we meeting all 4 of their requirements, we're also trying to meet the performance standards for dust control. The map on the right-hand side shows you in different colors all the different landowners around the lake. Another challenge is actually balancing our goals. There's plenty of goals on the lake. 5 of the bigger ones are maintaining habitat value, public trust value, tribal values, meeting or exceeding dust control standards, and of course, water conservation. Can anybody tell me what they think is the most important of these 5? I'm glad I know what answer because that was a trick question. They're all equally important. And trying to meet the goals of one without encroaching on the other 4 is extremely difficult. So achieved to date. On the left-hand side, I got a picture of what the lake used to look like 20 years ago. On the right-hand side, what it looks like today. And I want to go over a little bit of detail of what that actually consists of. So to date, we have built 10 capital projects, and in doing so, we have introduced 48.6 square miles of completed dust control. That leaves a contingency of 4.8 square miles of dust control that our air regulator can still order us to do. So if anybody here knows our air regulator, give them a call. Let them know we're doing a really good job out there, and to just forget about that 4.8. And I'll tell you why. We've reduced 99% dust emissions in the last 20 years. So back in 1999, we had emissions of 52,000 tons per year. This year to date, we're at 355 tons, which is really great. So that 48.6 square miles is actually broken up in the pie chart below. The 3 slices on the right that are blue are all shallow flooding, which is obviously the majority of the lake. Managed veg, gravel, tillage are the next biggest ones. So to date, we have spent $2.4 billion, and that's 55% for capital projects, which are the 10 projects I just mentioned, 18% for regular operations and maintenance, and then 21% for water. So Every drop of water that goes to the lake is a drop of water that cannot get sent down the aqueduct to the city of LA. Then we have to offset that water by purchasing water from the Metropolitan Water District. And then 6% goes to regulatory fees. So 55%, I said, goes to capital projects of that $2.4 million. And what exactly does that get us in infrastructure? Like it is 220 miles of roads and berms, 32 miles of mainline pipe between 4.5 to 6 feet in diameter, 150 miles of perforated drain pipe for our managed vegetation, 3,600 miles of drip irrigation for our managed veg farm, almost 400 miles of pipe between 2 to 4 inches, and 35 pumping stations that pump water out of our main line, filters the water, and into our dust control areas. So that's a lot of infrastructure, and it literally takes a small army of people to operate and maintain the lake. So at Owens Lake, we have a staff of over 70 folks that report there daily. We have engineers, construction crews, hydrographers, biologists, and tradesmen like welders, machinists, auto mechanics, pump mechanics. And then from the Bishop to the city of LA, we have other offices and construction yards that provide secondary support, like design engineering, purchasing of equipment and materials, surveying, permitting, legal and real estate support as well. And that's all I got for you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Matt Desert. I'm the Air Pollution Control Officer for Imperial County. I've been the Air Pollution Control Officer for almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years this January. Before that, I had the opportunity to serve as an I&D Director for the Imperial Irrigation District for 6 years. During that time, we were able to put the historical lawsuits between the County of Imperial and the I&D to bed over the Salton Sea. And we also put together a 10-year plan with the state. That's my opportunity at that time, good fortune to run into and meet Mr. Michael Cohen, and very grateful for the forums he's put on, none more so than today's and ongoing. These very factual, scientific forums that are calm, that are making arguments for cases in a very professional manner are so helpful and such a guidance tool. Also, you need to know that it's my understanding that all the presentations were emailed directly to Michael. He's very hands-on on his organization and management of his events, and I think that's representative of how he's handled his career in the scientific field and beyond. Going forward here, I'll blame it on the thumbs, I heard that earlier. So some of these pictures are going to be, you'll remember seeing these in early presentations from the IID and other good folks. This is showing the playa and the exposed playa and the Salton Sea, particularly from the south end. Remember, we're in the Imperial County, we're not in Durkee County, where we're located today. So this shows the exposed playa over time, and we're moving forward to 2022. Keep in mind this new position I'm in here almost 3 years is coming January. It's an enforcement and a regulatory position, a position that I was unfamiliar to when I took the job, and a position that I was optimistic that to try to avoid that part of regulatory hammer portion of the job regarding the Salton Sea, because we had put together and negotiated some good documents with the County of Imperial and IID, with the state of California, and with all the participants of the Salton Sea, something called the Tenure Plan, that we're almost 5 years into at this time. So here's some more numbers taking us out to 2047, showing the exposed playa again from the south end of the Salton Sea or Imperial Valley. And thanks again to IID. Their works with CMH Studio to put these documents together. The other picture shows the receding shoreline in 2047, and it's approximately 4 miles at this location. These locations are all, again, in Imperial County where the water line is very shallow, so a couple inches loss in elevation of water ends up being extreme acres or feet of exposed playa. So as a regulator, we come up with rules, and our rules, our laws that we enforce for fugitive dust or PM10 are called Rule 800. There's a series of rules in this 800 series that we work with. I'll give you a moment to read the slide there. And as a regulatory agency, we have lots of rules, and they're much longer and lengthy than this. Specifically, out of our Rule 800 series, we have Rule 804, which deals with open areas, which is what the exposed playa in and around the Salton Sea will be viewed through the lens of this rule in a worst case scenario. So we're looking at vegetation coverage of 50% to make a best available control measure. We're looking at applying water for dust suppression of vegetated areas. We're looking at pave or apply and maintain gravel. Some of these things you've seen and heard earlier from Owens Lake. And we also have alternative backing and implement alternative backing for exposed playa at the Salton Sea if approved by both the APCD and EPA. Alternative backing may be approved with technical evaluation demonstrating that the proposed alternative backing achieves a stabilized surface and meets the 20% opacity requirement. The important thing to note here on this one is that this is not available to our friends at Owens Lake, the LADWP. They are held to a higher standard of hard, what's called backing. So we have a joint powers authority that makes the decisions on projects moving forward. These are the primary members that manage that, along in partnership with the state of California. They administer the monies that are put in by all three of these agencies to do projects, and these are basically the decision makers. I put this up there because it's important because so much time has gone by the tenure plan, and sometimes these agencies amongst the JPA thoughts or ideas aren't lining up. And there's other folks involved in this decision making, such as Imperial County and Riverside County that chime in. We have the State Water Resource Control Board, again, the State Natural Resources Department, that's a member of the JPA. And in the future, we'll be dealing with projects that will most likely involve the Army Corps of Engineers. So I'll put that up there to be really bold, and so you know who the decision-making agencies are. Who do we go to talk to about JPA activities other than the state? So the QSA JPA projects thus far are roughly 2,020 acres. These areas contributed 35.51 tons total for emissions to the playa. There's currently 345 acres of conceptually designed projects and 2,050 acres of site characterization projects. So I believe Jessica will have more information on this.
Speak up.
I will. So the 2,020 acres is primarily surface revenue. You saw pictures of that on the Owens Lake presentation. It got off to a good start. You know, typical projects, they start, they stop. This past summer, starting in July, the ID started and successfully completed near 800 additional acres. And just recently at an ID board meeting, the ID board agreed to expand their scope of work with their contractor to do upwards of another 2,000 acres, I believe, in conjunction with the state of California's requirements. So it shows the state and the IAD working together as good partners. It's just a matter of how much time it takes. So here's the state of California members, decision-making bodies, part of the JPA and beyond. The stipulated order, which came out of the 10-year plan, had a specific amount of acreage requirements to be done. The progress has been a little bit slow on this. It's concerning because as a regulatory agency in the Imperial Valley, we are going to be held, the Air Pollution Control District is going to be held accountable, specifically myself, to those phone calls and concerns at a local or regional level. The state of California started the Red Hill Bay project. It's been underway for some time now. And that's not a negative 618, that's a bullet point. I asked that question earlier. And so, and that's going to be roughly 10.96 tons of emissions from the playa. We have species conservation habitat projects of 3,770 acres, with another 24.46 tons of total landfill emissions on the playa. The thing is, these are long-standing projects that really do need to get going. There's a picture coming up of the Red Hill Bay project, a recent wind event, dust event related to wind activities. And they're a man-made nature, so it was a trite concern when we were just to receive that picture. So here's Red Hill Bay, and this is coming off of the project there. The area over the shoreline, over where the water is, where the water shoreline has exceeded is cleared from dust, and some of this is migrating in, but this is really the first event that's been captured and submitted from the public to us, and it got our attention. And that public can be individuals, that public can be the environmental justice movement or groups that are out there. That public can be local newspapers. So we take it all serious, and it is concerning though, the amount of time that it's taken. And I'm not as optimistic and a cheerleader as I once was that this 10-year plan and these projects are going to work out in a timely manner. And I don't look forward to being that hard regulator, but it seems that's the kind of direction we're going. Very optimistic to hear the messaging from Secretary Crowfoot today about the urgency and the need for the projects, and the idea that we can do multiple projects at the same time rather than wait for one project to be finished. So this is the end of the presentation, and it is good to have partners. Good messages today with the IAD. Good messages from the California Air Resources Board. The Air Pollution Control District looks forward to continuing these relationships. But it is hard for us because we're the regulatory. We're the one working with the environmental justice groups through the 8617 activities, if any of you know what that is. We're the ones taking the phone calls. We're the ones working with public health. I'm concerned about asthma, concerned about the makeup and content of the soils and the soil profiles that are involved here. With that, I'll close. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Humes. If you've heard me present before, I previously was Jessica Benton, so I'm the same person. But I am a Valley resident. I grew up in the Imperial Valley, as in that desert. So, you know, not only is the Salton Sea important to us on a professional level, but, we have a personal level there as well. I'm raising a young family right now. It's close to I have worked for the IID for a little over 10 years and closing in on 11. And I started out working on various other mitigation projects under the quantification settlement agreement, anything from burrowing owls to desert pupfish to creation of managed marshes and specifically air quality. So today I'm going to build off of what Brian talked about in the last panel, mostly about project design and then construction. So we have a comprehensive science-based adaptive program. We've been working on this for about a little over 3 years now. I had someone earlier tell me that this program is as old as my children, which is true. So, it's growing as they grow. But the main components of this program include annual emissions monitoring, dust control planning, and then implementation. So like Brian went over earlier today, our annual emissions estimates, where does the emissions occur, and then how much PM10 dust is actually being emitted. And we do that with mapping by exposure, characterizing surfaces, modeling wind conditions, and then estimating emissions. Our proactive dust control plan and projects is really focused on prioritizing where projects are going to go. So where is the majority of dust coming off of the playa, and where can we focus those projects to reduce the dust as a whole for the Imperial and Coachella valleys. So proactive dust control planning, how do we do that? We start with assessing soil suitability, how much water is available in the area, what type of water efficient methods are there if we are to use water, considering other stakeholder projects. What is the state doing? What are other entities doing around the Salton Sea? And then selecting a dust control measure that we can implement on the ground. So these are the project areas that we have either in the planned or constructed state. I know one person earlier talked about could you maybe reclaim farmland or playa as farmland, and I just want to point out that we're here, just in this area, we do have a small field that was reclaimed by a farmer very successfully actually. So it is possible in certain areas where you can purchase water like you do through normal farming practices, but it's not something that you could do everywhere around the Salton Sea. So our projects focus on either surface roughening and vegetation establishment, or just vegetation. So where are we to date? We have projects either in the queue as being site identified, or they're being characterized, some are in the design phase, and then construction. So the green bars are the 2017-18 acres where we were project-wise, and then the black is the 18 and 19. And these are just a couple of pictures of our vegetation for furrowing, and then an area that's been established for a few years now. So once a project's on the ground, we go into the performance monitoring. How well are our projects doing over time? How do we need to augment them? Do we need to come in and do something else? Do we need to just make some little fixes? But we do that by ground-based sensor monitoring. We use our round shot cameras. We have 2 currently around the Salton Sea. We're going to install another 3 cameras at key locations around the Salton Sea. We have LiDAR monitoring on our project sites. Those are done quarterly. We have sandflux modeling, and then sandflux monitoring as well. Actually, one of our images, I believe, was our LiDAR. And this is our Alamo South project area. So you can see on the bottom left is what it looked like during construction. We did furrows. Those are being irrigated in the bottom left. The picture next to it is what it looks like after vegetation is established. This is just a little over a year old. The top picture is what it looks like during a dust event. So like Matt said, this area is adjacent to Red Hill Bay, but the uncontrolled playa, which is the Red Hill Bay site itself, is very dusty. Our field study is pretty calm. We're doing our job. The roughness monitoring is what it looks like when we use all of our performance monitoring tools. We can see how the furrows are changing over time. Are they degrading? Is sand moving in? What sort of augmentation do we need to do? And then also, what does the vegetation look like? And then our sand flux monitoring. So the big thing going forward around the Salton Sea is what are our big challenges? Right now, a majority of the playa will be on the south end of the Salton Sea, so that's very important to Imperial County. There is a good amount that will be in the Riverside County, but the most emissive area is along that west side, and we do have communities that are right up against the west side of the Salton Sea, so they will be potentially impacted over time if nothing is done. And with that, our biggest challenge is water availability. So on the south, we have agriculture, we have drains and rivers that can use, that water can be used for vegetation, getting projects established. On the north, we have water. The east has a little bit, but it will not be impacted nearly as much. But on the west, we have zero water. So ways we're looking into finding water include groundwater monitoring and possibly test wells to see if there is water available to get vegetation established, as well as dry, wetless dust control measures that can be implemented. So the top right picture is what a wind event looks like coming off of the desert. Again, the same photos Earl and Brian showed with the sand encroaching onto the playa. They create these sand dunes that just take over. That's pretty much my presentation. I was fortunate enough, thanks to Michael, to fly around the sea this morning, so thank you, Michael, for that. But it gave a really awesome view of not only what the playa is looking like, but the areas where there is water coming in, the type of vegetation and projects that could be potentially out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my name is Vivien Maisonneuve. I work for the Department of Water Resources and I'm Program Manager for the Salton Sea Management Program. First, I'd like to acknowledge the people that we work with. Of course, WR does the implementation, but nothing would have happened if it wasn't for the help of the Department of Fish and Wildlife, a huge contribution of the California Resources Board, and of course the leadership of the Natural Resources Agency. Of course, all the people out there. Again, Michael for organizing the summit today. It was in great need. We also have ISD, of course, that we work with. But again, many partners that we learned from, I would say Owens Lake when I went to visit, that's some places that we learned a lot. So first today, what I'm going to go over very quickly is the habitat and dust suppression areas and the projects that we have, that we're planning. Dust suppression in general, how we approach it, and also our short and long-term plans. So first, the areas. So as you know, we have different projects, and we also obligated to implement various type of projects, mostly habitat and dust suppression. So we've implemented the habitats projects in areas that are all very emissive. So we financed the U.S. Fish and Wildlife for the implementation of the Red Hill projects, very emissive area. The site of the SCH itself is also something very emissive. And also we're looking at implementing, so of course we're looking at implementing a bigger project around the Red Hill Bay. But also we're also in development of a concept for the North Lake. So those areas, we're trying to target them because those are emissive areas. sometimes because their populations are exposed to those emissions. So we use various factors to understand really what are the priorities and where those areas should be. So because some of our priorities are related to creating habitat at the Salton Sea, then basically we're trying to achieve both at the same time. So of course, as you know, the habitat will be concentrated around where the water is available, of course, happens to be the emissive areas because those, as we showed, the desert wash, all the estuary areas are pretty emissive. So what we're trying to do, although we know we're late, we're trying to implement that 15,000 acres of dust suppression projects, also 3,000 acres of habitat by year 2028. All right, so I'm going to give you an example of the type of habitat we're trying to create here. And so this is the SCH. That picture is taken from our EIR/EIS document. And that's the one that we're trying to build by the 2023. We're looking at, this represent 37 and 70 acres, but we're going to build this under design build project delivery method. We slightly talk about that, and Secretary Crowfoot talk about it, and we're hoping to release the RFP by the end of this month, November 31st, October 31st. The project is said to cost around $206 million. The contract itself will probably be around $180 million. So the idea is to create deep water habitat that would be helpful for the birds, for reproduction of fish, and that water will cascade in the future as the sea recedes into shallower ponds. So that will control dust, but also create shallow water areas. And potentially bring water farther out if necessary in areas where there's no water, and create, of course, just area covered with water that may or may not have any purpose for habitat, but at least will be the requirement to abate now this for air quality purpose. So this is directly taken from Earl. This is to show kind of how we choose and how we decide to approach those projects and why we decide to prioritize a project versus another. Sometimes because they're very emissive, and other times because, well, there's a lot of people living around that area. So that needs to be, of course, taken care of in priority. But of course, what we're trying to show here is those are the proposed dust suppression area that we're working with, and thank you for IIT for doing a lot of that legwork. So again, we're talking about 9,000 acres of dust suppression areas in total. So that doesn't include the SCH projects. So we're talking about, again, those alluvial fans that are very emissive, and like you've seen already today, many of those areas are very emissive. So we're talking Bombay Beach, the area around the Arlo. Of course, we're taking care of the area on the river. And also we will be looking at the North Lake, how to, so a lot of that has been implemented in North Lake by IIT already, but we're also going to look at the development of habitat that also supplements any dust suppression project as necessary. As we learn more about the playa, the type of emissivity, and et cetera, et cetera. So about that, we will have a outreach event about the suppression project in November. So stay tuned. We'll announce it. I think it's going to be around the 19th of November, but more about that later. So just to describe here, we're looking at 9,000 acres. The timing may vary, mostly because of the permitting, but also potentially of funding. We'll see how far we can take those projects, but we really try to get it done as soon as possible and prioritize, of course, based on the science, but also the community feedback. So a project that we're really looking at, where we're trying to test a strategy, a permitting strategy, is the Bouchard Road project on the playa. So Bouchard is here, so it's nothing to do with let's see, a public works project. It's just because Bouchard is right there and we felt it was a nice parcel that we already have under easement with BLM. that we access through the land that will also have an easement for through IIT. The permit is pending. We're still negotiating with the Army Corps so that we can actually implement that dust suppression projects in the area. It's a fairly small project, but we're hoping once we can make sure that that project is working and we have a process in place, then we can put out a schedule and really understand how fast we can implement the projects and be realistic in our delivery timeline and also cost. So that will be something that's going to be very informative. Fortunately, we know a lot already because of the work Adi has done, but that's something that's really going to help us refine our methodology and try to streamline implementation. For this project, specifically, we're planning on doing some tilling, so just rough surface roughing for that area. It will be monitored, but keeping that we're doing this, but eventually we're hoping it's going to be covered with the SCH project. So it's a temporary method, not so expensive, but really here we're testing a project. And again, things are changing. There is some maintenance, but we're also looking at long-term solutions, if possible, in certain areas. So project planning and permitting in the short term. So we submitted, for example, for the Bush Hour project, aquatic resources delineation back in July 2019. We're still negotiating with the Corps, Army Corps engineers. Then planning and designing project above the ordinary high water mark, based on, of course, on this aquatic resources delineation. So basically means that delineate the direction of the Army Corps, and if we can be successful to with these projects, then we can go around the Salton Sea with the same methodology and implement those projects a little faster. And as you receive, we'll be able to cover more playa. Because at this point, it's kind of difficult to implement project with the Army Corps jurisdiction. It kind of slows things down a little bit. But again, working with great partners, so we're hoping that this is going to be done. And we're looking at implementation and monitoring around the years, this year and next year for some monitoring. And of course, construction of the SCH will start soon. So it will be covered, but at least we'll have this process nailed down. As far as the long term, we're working on an agreement with the Army Corps that should be executed fairly soon, this year, actually. That will cover all sorts of activities, whether it's habitat, dust suppression, different type of dust suppressions, anywhere of for the line on 2003, elevation of the sea, up to 2030. So that's what we're developing right now, hoping to be completed first by 2020 or first quarter of 2021, or the winter of 2021. And of course, there are other, so before we can implement, so permit is a big one, of course. If you think about it, you always have to have the access of the land, you always need to have the water, of course, and then the permitting. So those are the top three challenges that we have implementing. Engineering, we have all the science that we can have to execute and to get this done. But it's really when it comes to those three items, those are the most challenging. Yet, to implement the tenure plans, it's about securing water supply, acquiring land access and easement, and securing funding, of course, for the long term. So once we spend the budget that we have currently, we know that's going to cost more. All right, so partnerships, very important. So what we're looking at currently is cooperation dust suppression plan. So we're going to come out with a dust suppression plan that, of course, will involve a community with, but also our partners. And we're looking currently going into an agreement with IIT for the implementation of the Bush Harbor project. And also, we have already implemented in place an agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation that will be seed money for implementation. So involvement of federal entity to work on federal land, but then I would actually work towards other goals. So it's a matching fund. It's not that I'm going to fund 100%, or I'm not expecting them to fund 100%, but at least it will be a significant participation of the federal government in the implementation of the suppression projects. So again, it won't happen by itself or only if the state does something. It would really take a lot of partnership with the community, of course, with the main landowners, so those are what we're targeting. But as we move forward, we're also going to create more And so that will be part of our long-term strategy in order to implement, the tenure plan. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
I think we have time for a few questions.
What does IID intend to do when surface roughening loses effectiveness after about 3 to 5 years? Is there water available to make it effective again?
So right now, our plan is to just continue performance monitoring, and then as a site proves that it's not effective, we'll come in and either augment. We could do that with vegetation. So depending on the water availability, we would do vegetation in that area. Or if it's a site that may have a longer term project coming into queue, we may just fold that in and try to retill. We could also try using a surfactant as a possibility, or some other type of temporary dust control. But really, it's all site specific and depends on what our performance monitoring shows.
DWP also does regulatory maintenance on our tillage sites almost every summer. We have sites that degrade, areas that were tilled in sandier soils that are less preferable. What we do is either we add an additional row of tillage to increase roughness, or we completely flatten, flood, and retill the area. It's very simple to do.
This is a question regarding some of the costs, because Adam, you had brought up some of the costs. You said you spent $2.4 billion to date, I guess, up at Owens Lake. So what's a little deceiving is the scale of the project we have versus Owens Lake. So it says our mapping for Salton Sea shows by 2030, without any replenishment, there would be about 60,000 acres of exposed plot. That, by the way, is about the size of Sacramento, which is good to tell politicians. So you got exposed plot the size of Sacramento. Okay, that 60,000 acres converts to about 100,000 100 square miles, which is double the size of Owens Lake. And if you did 2.4 billion at Owens Lake, can we anticipate 5 billion for Salton Sea dust mitigation? And, in general, because that number is important, because that's how some of these schemes are going to be evaluated in terms of replenishment versus dust mitigation.
Right, and I think that number is very dependent on how exactly we're going to mitigate dust at the Salton Sea. If you guys are using measurements that are more cost effective, maybe you won't get to that $5 billion. $2.4 billion is what it cost us, the route that we took. So it'd be dependent on how you guys do that.
One question, please. So we can finish this. Sorry.
So we did a quick calculation. It could be up to 18 billion if you implemented the same mitigation measures that they have at Owens Lake.
And to put things in perspective, you're right, it's 2 to 3 times the size of Owens Lake. And remember, at Owens Lake, there's a empty lake, Playa exposed. There's a sister lake, Mona Lake, which is a hypersaline lake, which is also a part of the LADWP efforts and projects. Actually, the idea is both. It's a hypersaline lake that's left and a tremendous amount of exposed playa. But in no means should our presentations try to minimize the costs or the size of the projects or the scope, or the air pollution control district's concern, the lack of progress and the timeliness that needs to happen.
If I may ask one question. Based on all the presentation, I see contour line 2047 and all that work that you are working very hard on. It seems to me that it's completely ignoring input of seawater, which will flood all those things. I respectfully urge you to consider that because I heard the gentleman mention $1 billion expense for a project like that. What if you import seawater and flood all those projects? I mean, based on what I've seen, you're completely ignoring import water. Definitely, you're warning us you're going to get rid of lake.
So I think the intent, and if I understand your question correctly, is if we bring more water, we may flood the project that we have currently. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Right, so the intent is to make sure that those work together. Even if you reflood the entire Salton Sea, the SCA, the species conservation habitat, will still provide a complexity of a structure in the habitat that would allow for better habitat. So even if anything, that would give you that. Now, between the time that we look for an alternative water and the time that we'll rebuild the SCH, we hope that at least the SCH will bridge that gap. So we do not lose our microinvertebrates, that we don't lose our birds, we don't lose what's necessary until we can find the alternative source of water. Again, we don't want to pit the immediate term projects versus the long-term projects. It's really important that those two work in complementarity.
Right, but why not wait until state finally make decision on which project they will proceed with that?
So I can answer that question. It's something that right now I'm supposed to implement the species conservation habitat, and I think it will be a good project for Salton Sea.
The time isn't on our side right now. No one's saying that the C2C plan isn't in the future, but at this time, with the 10-year plan, we've got to get projects going sooner rather than later. Not only human health projects or PM10 projects, but habitat projects.
Thank you. Question for Adam Solis. Notice from your pie chart that over half of the projects at Owens Dry Lake are highly water-based, shallow flooding, and sprinklers. What's the drive? You're paying, I think, something like $600 an acre foot to buy water to supply that. What's the primary driver for having so much of the land area in water-based? Two, last time I was up at Owens Dry Lake, there was a very active gravel spreading project going on, and not much action on tillage, although gravel is more expensive. What's the driver for recently doing a lot of gravel versus tillage? And final question related to that, on any particular set of acres of tillage, how often do you have to do substantial maintenance such as re-tillage or something major to keep it going?
I think I'll offer questions. So to answer the first question, when we first received orders, this was the first time we'd ever done any dust control. We had very little time to do it. The easiest way for us to do that was by just spreading out water. So it was either through ponded or sprinkler irrigation. So initially we had a lot of pond water, and it's taken us a long time. We're actually going through a master project right now. What we're doing is we're looking at the feasibility of specifically these high water use areas and figuring out how to convert them to low water use areas, and at the same time maintaining those 5 goals that I mentioned in my slides. Second question, I think you mentioned between gravel and tillage, and it's also a balancing act. When we had tillage implemented, we were capped on how much tillage we can use, and we're also forced to do a large scale mitigation project to offset the habitat that we lost when we converted shallow flood sites to tillage. What was the third question?
How often do you need to do the maintenance?
Oh, right. So it really depends on the site location. So one thing that we've learned is the location where we're actually doing our tillage is very important. We have to really understand what the soils are like. We've got a site that has seen very minimal maintenance since like 2012 or 2014. And we've got some sites that are in sandier soils that might see maintenance almost every summer. So it varies a lot.
I recall, and maybe I'm wrong, the initial 10-year plan included the infrastructure backbone. And if I'm right, has that been removed from the 10-year plan? What's the status of that?
No, not exactly. Actually, the purpose of building those deeper ponds, such as the SCH, the North Lake, or around the Arno, is to fulfill that objective of the backbone infrastructure. The idea is to keep that water elevated so you create a head, and then you can disperse that water onto the playa, or transport it even farther for either other habitat or the suppression project. So it's the same principle. So
the infrastructure backbone was a canal conveying water. Is that no longer part of the 10-year plan?
I think the backbone that you're referring to was in one of IE's plan. I believe when it came to the 10-year plan, we created those opportunity areas where would be implemented dust suppression projects and deep water habitat and shallow water habitat. So there would not be, well, maybe there will be in the future as we deploy the whole 10-year plan. But as of right now, the idea is to really create those those deeper water habitats that would eventually fulfill the same purpose as the backbone infrastructure, that the term that we use.
Thanks so much. I was just curious, with regards, I mean, the timescales that we're looking at with the Salton Sea aren't really so much different than the timescales that we start thinking about with regards to climate change. And, you know, every little area is going to change in a slightly different way, but in general, like arid regions, as the planet warms up, should become a little more arid, which seems kind of hard to believe because it's pretty darn dry already, but like that's what the projection is, and there's a lot of good reasons why that should be the case. That when we have rainfall events, they should become, I think someone talked about it earlier today, like not necessarily that we're getting more or less rain, but maybe more rain in shorter periods of time, longer drought periods. And I'm just wondering, how does a little bit of understanding of how our climate might be changing or is changing really over the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, how does that figure into planning? You know, we're talking about these like multi-billion-dollar projects that in theory, you know, we're spending a lot of money, they should kind of last a long time.
So the way we approach it is to make sure that in case of a heavy rain event, a large rain event, that the system can absorb and evacuate that water appropriately. And so that's an engineering challenge that we're trying to work on. Of course, we have projections and we're trying to be able to understand up to how much water, but of course, it is possible that at one point the system will be overwhelmed. We do not foresee per se, because most of those systems actually are actively pumped as opposed to be basically a passive system or just gravity flow from the water from the watershed. Imagine a barrage into a river. So that's why we're a little more protected when it comes to those projects. But again, it is a risk. We're fully aware of it. And also when it comes to drier climates, we are trying to only use as little water as possible in our projected demand for those habitats. We're trying to make sure that if it's 20 or 30% of that river that we're using, that it will at least still be 20 or 30% of that river still left, even under very dry conditions. Primarily because the valley relies on ag to have that water mostly. So that's also why it's a little bit decoupled from the climate change aspect of things.
And when we look at vegetation establishment through dust control, we're looking at native species that use minimal water. And we're trying to target those to areas that either have drain water or river water coming in, but also areas that could possibly utilize minimal washes or groundwater if it's available, but trying to use as minimal amount of water as possible from a dust control standpoint. I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but it's related to climate change, but it's just how we've approached it at IAP to this point.
Yeah, I have a question for our fellow panelist, Adam from LAPWP. Adam, we talked earlier before the panel was convened about the opportunities that are at the Salton Sea as compared to
the conditions you're working under at Owens Lake, whereas you're working under basically a court order or a law, accountable to the Air Pollution Control District, LADWP is. Yet what we have at the Salton Sea at this time, this tenure plan, this stipulated water order, is really a more flexible tool, a partnership with all these agencies that one, have all this alternative backup that you don't have the availability to. And that two, the Imperial County still has the exceptional event clause for wind events where we can exempt ourselves from, dust height counts on our monitors if the weather conditions, lead it to that type of story. Could you share what your thoughts are of this great opportunity that we have that you don't have?
Definitely. Yeah, I think the regulatory climate here at the Salton Sea is extremely positive, and I urge all those that are involved to seize that opportunity. Like I mentioned in my presentation, we have basically 5 methods approved for dust control, and outside of those 5, we really don't have too many options. We have 2 small areas that are using sand fence or above grade irrigation, but other than that, there's 5 methods, and those 5 methods might not apply to everywhere on the lake that we're trying to control test. But unfortunately, we have no other choice. So there's some flexibility here at the Salton Sea. Like I mentioned, I really encourage everybody involved to seize that opportunity.
Right, and that flexibility, I've got to mention, I look into the audience and it's different when you sit up here, especially when the projectors hit you in the eyes. And I see Al Kalin, a farmer from the Imperial Valley, private environmental guy, professional expert on the community and duck hunting and the environment. Michael Cohen sitting here, putting on these great forums, factual based and science and peaceful, calm, smart forums. But this clock is ticking. And I got to tell you, we wouldn't have a tenure plan. We wouldn't have a stipulated water order if the local elected officials involved here in these negotiations, the county board of supervisors, the IID board of directors, Coachella Irrigation District, and others, San Diego County Water Authority hadn't gotten together to address these concerns. And really, the environmental and habitat group that Mr. Cohen represented and worked on was key to that 10-year plan and those negotiations. Many people don't know that, but those efforts are trying to get buy-in and assure that everybody that's had a seat at the table would have their issues resolved to some extent. And then that took us to the 10-year plan. And there's so many Vivien's here, Earl here with the state, and it's heartbreaking to see those presentations on the fish and the wildlife and the bird counts. What's happened under our watch? I mean, how many years, how many meetings are we going to sit here and look at each other and talk about these things? And these issues aren't brought forward because nobody has the history or the legacy. So my hat's off to you, Mr. Cohen, always a professional to work with when I was at the ID and working here at the County of Imperial. And I know you've been let down. I don't know how we catch up on that habitat. And I just want to finish on this. We also fell into the trap at one time where the monies, we've gone through so many obstacles to get these projects going forward. There was a competition for them, JPA monies. Do we do habitat projects, environmental habitat projects for the birds and critters? Or do we do PM10 human health projects? And there was a competition and it stymied any type of decision making. And we can't compete for those funds. We are so far behind. So again, Secretary Crowfoot mentioned today the availability and the ability to the state to take a look at multiple projects and move forward at one time, and we need to do that. Other representatives from Riverside and Imperial County in the room, there's been issues, competition over projects from North County to South County, and we've got to lay those fights down and move forward with all the projects we have available at this time, so we don't create an obstacle to progress moving forward. And I've said enough. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. If you'll stick around just a little bit, I think we have a special guest.
Thank you. First, let's give our panel a round of applause. We do have a special guest for those who didn't decide to stay the whole day. So I might ask, if you don't mind, Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia to come down and address the audience. Please, yes. It was the free parking that did it. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to say a few words. First and foremost, thank you to UC Riverside, their academics, their students, their partners from other academic institutions who really lend itself to have a good conversation with methodology and rational, data to be able to support, the conversations that are happening. And certainly want to say thank you to those on this particular panel. I got to listen to all of your presentations, including that of Owens Lake, where we have a lot of opportunity to take away a lot of lessons learned and how to approach this problem. But I wanted to say, today I spent the morning in West Shores, met with about 20 plus parents at the high school, concerned mothers as it relates to all their life issues happening in and around the sea. And their biggest issue that they raised to us this morning was the public health implications that they're seeing take place right now in real time as it relates to their children dealing with these spontaneous nosebleeds, these unprecedented types of allergies and reactions that they're seeing happen on a regular basis. And, one of the things that struck me, and something that I think all of us are guilty of and can do a better job, is when I talked to them about the Salton Sea Management project plan, the 20 women that were there, the mothers, had no idea that there's actually a plan moving forward. And I know that a lot of work has taken place to develop that plan. We assume that we're doing everything that we can to inform and educate the general public of what's going on. And I think, this presentation right now gives us a real-time synopsis, right, of the work that is underway, the work that's happened. But yet a lot of people in our community are still not informed about the major progress, yet obstacles that remain in front of us to address what I believe for our region is probably the most important critical issue that we can face, that ties into the economy of the area, the public health and well-being of the area, our educational institutions of the area, and ultimately, really, again, the quality of life for the 300 plus people who live here full time, and that 100 plus thousand people that visit us for a few months out of the year. And so, this is for me one of the number one priorities when it comes to our work in the legislature. And I'll give you, an example. There have been, 3 very important key pieces of policy that we've worked in collaboration with our colleagues, our state senator, Ben Wessel, who represents here in Imperial County. That's and they were all mentioned here. It was, one, the adoption of the plan that now is state statute that we have to pursue, and the Water Board is going to hold us accountable for that. The other is the ability to have a design build process to expedite some of these projects to move a little quicker. The other that was mentioned is AB 617, that we saw a unique opportunity to be able to draw greater attention to the PM10 dust mitigation problems that exist, not just in our area, but throughout the state, right? And the last and final one is SB5 that led to Prop 68 that really allocated what would be the largest investment from the state in the range of $200 million, along with $8 million in the prior budget. And so we have a plan, we have some money, and clearly today with this presentation, we did see where things are headed. Now, I think I could just kind of mention maybe a precursor to tomorrow's panel, the politics, policy, and the purse strings, right? There is some politics. There are some heavy politics at the state level as it relates to this becoming a statewide priority. When I mentioned the Salton Sea, I have colleagues that believe that over the time that I've been in the legislature, that I've been able to siphon away billions of dollars for this project, which is far from the truth, right? So the perception is that we've been paying a lot of attention to this issue statewide. And so when I asked for $300 million, people are saying, hey, well, this pet project that Eduardo has in his district, and this is far from being a pet project, right? This is an emergency crisis that has a significant impact on the quality of life of Southern California, right? Not to mention the people living in and around the sea. So my fight right, in the state capitol is making that point and being able to get the support to receive the type of funding that we have in the last 2 years. And so I want to share with you that that fight will continue as next year we introduce what I believe will be the most important piece of policy that I will carry next year, and that's a climate resiliency bond. We're going to approach the issue of water conservation, habitat restoration, and the needs that we have in Salton Sea through the lens of climate resiliency. And we're going to ask for another $300 million that will go towards the management plan and then some. But that's going to be a fight that I'm going to need a lot of support on to make a statewide case that this isn't a pet project for us in Southern California. This is a real-time emergency crisis that we have before us. So I look forward to kind of elaborating and collaborating with you all as we move that political agenda forward. You know, Mr. Desert mentions this appropriately and timely. You know, projects that are ready to go today should be the ones that are funded. And we have to try to avoid the conversations about the south side of the sea got most of the money, or the north side needs to get equal to, or the east or the west side. There are projects throughout the entire sea that merit investment. And if they're ready to go, we should fund them. And fund them in the interest of making sure that we're mitigating the public health problems where populations are adjacent to these projects. So for example, there are some good projects that could be done in the Desert Shores communities to fill up some of those channels that don't cost a lot of money, that are near population, that could address all of the objectives of the plan. There are some projects on the north side of the sea that in a timely manner with plans and preparation and ready to go, we can fund those as well. And then there's of course the projects that we saw today that are tied to the southern part of the Salton Sea for purposes of water availability, and of course they're ready to go. And so, you know, those politics are real, just as they are at the state level here locally. And I think the community wants us to kind of stay close, stay in good harmony and in good faith as it relates to dealing with those politics, so that we're able to see some progress and some projects underway. Now, there are a few projects that are under construction, and many people don't know that. And so we have to do a better job going back to the public information, public outreach, to informing the public of the good work that's being done by the folks on this panel, those who spoke earlier, and then of course those who you will see later this afternoon. I'd like to just stop by saying thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. Our water consultant from the committee that I chair, Water Parks and Wildlife, is here. Keith Chelino, who is going to be here throughout the whole conference, has been here all day. And then our field rep, who oversees this issue here locally, Miguel Romero, will as well. And so you certainly have our attention throughout this conference. And again, I just want to say thank you to UCR, the academics involved, the students, and all those collaborating for the great work that you've done. Just this panel alone that I got to sit in gives us a real-time synopsis of what's happening out in the sea, what's the progress, what's yet to be done, and certainly the much work that we need to continue to commit to. So thank you again for the opportunity to say a few words, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Okay, so I think that finalizes today's events for the panels. Please enjoy